Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. My name is Kevin Dill. I'm a behavior specialist, and today I'm going to talk about automatic negative thoughts. Those automatic scripting thoughts that keep scripting in our head and actually drive our behavior. Well, it's one of the things that drives our behavior. So let's get into it with automatic negative thoughts. Okay, so the first thing for us to learn is that there is a relationship between four elements, and they're right in front of you on your screen. And those elements are the situation, the thoughts, the feelings, and our behavior. And the association or the relationship goes like this. So when we encounter a situation or something in our environment, well, that drives our thinking. And then thinking promotes our feelings, and then our feelings manifest into behavior. So let's imagine that you're going to a party and you're getting dressed for the party and you're thinking about this party. You're thinking about how many people will be there and what type of party it will be, and what you should wear to the party and what you shouldn't wear to the party, and what you'll look good in with for the party and what you won't look good in terms of going to the party. And that situation is driving your thoughts, and then your thoughts drive your feelings, like, oh, I don't look good in this, and oh, that's too tight on me, or that's too baggy on me, or that's too big or too small on me, and I feel uncomfortable with that, or I feel comfortable with this. I just want to be myself. So the situation is we're going to a party and we have all these thoughts about the party, and then those thoughts are driving feelings, and then those feelings manifest in behavior. What behavior? Well, what I choose to wear or what I choose not to wear. How I choose to do my hair, if I had any hair. But I'm sure, assuming you have hair, and how you'll do your hair, whether it's more elegant style or whether it's kind of fun and sporty style. That will be determined based upon your feelings, which are determined based upon your thoughts, which are determined then based on the situation that is at hand for you. So that's the thing we have to realize. Situations drive thinking, thinking drives feelings, feelings manifest in behavior. Let's go talk about some more examples. Okay, so let's look at a couple different situations. You may have been in these situations or something similar to this. This gives us an idea how this association or relationship between the situation or environment that I'm in and how my thinking comes from that, and then that promotes feelings which manifests in behavior. So let's say you're walking down the hallway in school and you wave to your friend, but your friend doesn't wave back to you, and automatically, like you didn't really even have to think about thinking like this. It just automatically came into your brain, this thought of, maybe my friend's mad at me. Did I do something wrong to him or her? Um, ah, Everybody saw that. I'm so stupid. And then your feelings of embarrassment or worry or anxiousness, or maybe a sad, or probably worried, like, what did I do to offend them? And then comes your behavior. And your behavior might be that you avoid them. You're like, well, if they're not going to wave back at me, I'm not going to feel this way, and I'm not going to have everybody look at me. And so you avoid them, maybe for the rest of the day, maybe for days or even weeks. And then during those days and weeks, the thoughts start coming into your head, and they start building about this, how negative this is. My friend hates me. I can't figure out what I did wrong, and why won't they talk to me? And it can hijack us. Or let's say that you've failed a test. You took a test in a class and you didn't do well on it, and you failed it, and you have these automatic negative thoughts right then, right there, when you get the grade back, and you think, I'm never going to get into college now. This is terrible. I must be the dumbest kid in the class. I'm not a math kid. I'll never understand math. And all these negative thoughts start scripting in your head. And then you feel worried. You feel anxious about, well, I'm going to have to take this class over again. Well, I'll never get into college now. What am I going to do? What am I going to do for a career? And maybe if you think, well, you know what, I'm not a math kid, I'll never understand math, you'll start to flop, or you'll start to give up on the class. You might even drop the class. You might even stop doing additional assignments and not study for tests. So situations can and do drive our thinking. And our thinking sometimes can be automatic. We really have to work at making sure that we capture those automatic thoughts. That's one of the strategies I'm going to talk to you about. Because if we don't work at capturing the thought, then it's just going to come automatically, and we might believe that thought. Oftentimes we do believe that thought, and we have a choice to believe it or not believe it. And then those thoughts then promote certain feelings, and those feelings drive our actions or drive our behavior. So let's look at a couple more scenarios. Let's take a look at another scenario or two, or situation or two. Let's say you have a situation where you're going for a drive with some of your friends, and you go through an intersection where maybe a year or two ago you had an accident at that intersection. And you start to see that intersection as you're coming up to it, and you start to sweat a little bit, and you start to have these thoughts of like, I can't handle this. It brings back too many traumatic memories or hard, difficult memories. And maybe like, I think we're going to have an accident if we go up to this intersection. You might even ask the driver, your friend, or if you're driving, to avoid that intersection, like to go way around that intersection. Because you have to like avoid it and escape it. And so you have these feelings of panic and anxiety and maybe a tight chest, and maybe you're even sweating a little bit, or you're breathing heavy. And you maybe you even say, stop, I got to get out of here. And you just leave because of that. So you ditch your friends. Maybe there's a situation where you have an upcoming class presentation and you're not prepared for that. And you think, I'm going to mess up my words. People are going to think I'm dumb. They're going to know I'm not prepared. Everybody's going to laugh at me. I'm going to look like a fool or an idiot. And so you become worried about it and anxious about it. Now, anxiety is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a really common thing. Being worried is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a common feeling. Both anxiety and worriness are common feelings. But it's because in fact, it makes us do something. If we're worried about not being prepared for a presentation, then it's going to kick us into gear, and it's going to cause us to do something. That's the behavior. Or if those automatic negative thoughts, I'm not prepared for this, I'm going to look like an idiot, if that's so overwhelming, then sometimes what we'll do with those feelings of worriness and anxiety is, instead of getting something done, we'll actually avoid, we'll procrastinate, we'll become psychosomatic in terms of we'll be sick to our stomach and won't feel well, can't get out of bed, because we want to avoid or escape that presentation. So again, the situation we're in drives our feelings, or drives our thinking. Our thinking drives our feelings. Our feelings then manifests in behavior. So what I want to talk to you about today is the thoughts that are not helpful but hurtful. And those are called automatic negative thoughts. And listen to the words automatic. So they just come automatically. We don't even have to think them into existence. They just come. And they're negative. So they're not helpful. They are hurtful. So they're automatic, they're hurtful or negative, and they are our thoughts, which means maybe they're not real. And so I want to talk to us today about how do we process those? How do we recognize those? And then what is a strategy or strategies we can use to address those? If we fail to address these automatic negative thoughts, there is a downward spiral that all of us have experienced, we've been a part of. So here's that downward spiral. Actually, what we want to do is we want to have an upward spiral with our thoughts, not a downward spiral. So a downward spiral, you can see it in front of you. Let me walk you through this. Let's say a situation again where you're not prepared for a presentation, or you didn't study for a test, or Maybe it's the run of the mill, I don't have my homework done again. It's late again. And this automatic negative thought comes up in your head. Again, automatic, you don't have to think it into existence. I always mess things up. And then the feelings of now I'm not ready for the test and my teacher may think I'm a loser. And so what's the point with this class? I'm just going to skip it. I'm just going to avoid it. And then if you avoid and skip the class or drop the class, there's this automatic thought again, another one that you're a failure or I'm a failure and I'm just going to drop out of school. And then if you do drop out, then there's these feelings of I can't accomplish anything. I feel isolated and separated with my friends. They're all going to graduate high school. They're all going to college, but I dropped these classes, and now I don't know what I'm going to do. And then a feeling of hopelessness, and it's just a continual downward spiral of negative thoughts. I'm stupid. I always mess up. My teacher thinks I'm dumb. What's the point of this? I feel sad. I feel depressed. I feel like I'm a loser. And it just is a spiral downward. So that's the danger of not understanding automatic negative thoughts that come to all of us and not being able to process those and use a strategy to help address those, because we all get them. It's just part of being human. So if you have them, well, don't criticize yourself too badly, because we all have them. But there are some tools that we can use to help us, and that's the bright spot. Let's move on. I know you're probably thinking, let's get to the strategy. How do I deal with this? I have them. In fact, I have a lot of these automatic negative thoughts. They're constantly scripting in my brain. Well, before we get to the strategy, there is an important step in here that I want to cover, and that is understanding what are called our thinking patterns or thinking traps. Now, these are some of the most common automatic negative thoughts. You've heard me say some of those in the previous scenarios. I'm stupid. I'm not a math person. I'll never get this. What's the use? Why don't I just quit this class? So those are all common automatic negative thoughts. But there are some pattern thoughts that are what are called thinking traps. And this is part of the strategy. Part of the strategy is being able to identify these, or what we call capture them. So if you don't know about them, there's no way you're going to be able to identify them, and there's no way you're going to be able to capture them. So let's talk in the next couple slides about what these common automatic negative thoughts, or what we call thinking traps or thinking patterns, are, so you can recognize, do you have any of these? Or maybe it's a relative or a friend that has these. You hear them talking about them and you're like, that's what that is. So the first one is all or nothing thinking. This is sometimes called black and white thinking. And the world is not necessarily always black and white. There's a lot of gray mixed in there. And so this person who has all or nothing thinking usually takes things to extremes, and they don't leave any room in the middle for flexibility. To look at a situation a different way with a different angle. So here's an example. Let's say you failed the test. An automatic, extreme black or white thinking pattern would be, I'm never going to get into college now. That's it. That's it. It's over. Like, my chances are over. And I'm like, well, you're a junior in high school, and this is one math class, one math test. I think you're going to have other opportunities. But a person who has black and white thinking, they don't have any gray. They don't see that. They just see what's right in front of them, and that's the failed test. And then this negative thinking pattern comes in called black and white, or all or nothing. It's like, that's it. I'm not going to be able to go to college. Another one is jumping to conclusions. So this is, and I'm going to read this, this is forming an opinion without enough evidence. And humans do this all the time. We are in a situation and our brain reads the situation, and then we jump to a conclusion, or we assume the worst. Well, let's take the example of failing on the test. Not only am I could be a black and white thinker, like I'm never going to get into college now, we assume the worst. So we jump to a conclusion. And maybe we need to look at the evidence like, well, I'm getting a C in the class, so a failing on one test may bring my grade down, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to get into college because the evidence there is there that I am passing this class. But our brains they don't necessarily want to look at the evidence. Our brains want to jump to the worst conclusion ever. And part of that is a defense mechanism because our brains are meant to survive. Our brains were designed by our creator to help us survive. And so we jump to the worst case scenario. That's sort of the caveman, thinking brain. But we're not cavemen and women. We don't live in that era anymore. We live in a sedimentary time where we don't even have to really grow our food. We just go to the grocery store and we buy it. We don't have to, hunt or forage for anything. We've got food. We've got plenty of food. And most of us have sedimentary jobs. We're sitting at desks. We're working on the computer. We're designing stuff. We're not, most of us. And there's some of us that are out. And we are, farming and we are producing and all of that. But most of us throughout the world live a sedimentary life. But our brain still thinks in survival mode. So part of jumping to conclusions is a survival technique for sure. And you might have heard it say that, well, you're trying to read somebody else's mind reading, or imagining how others are thinking. And I think to some extent, we do that when we read their body cues, we read their facial expressions and their body posture and their tone of voice. That's really good. That's actually good emotional intelligence. But when we take it too far and we jump to a conclusion, that's a thinking trap. So sometimes a strategy is that we have to step back before we jump to a conclusion, and we have to actually tell our brain, wait a minute, you're jumping to a conclusion. Step back. Let's look at the entire evidence here of the situation before we come up with a final conclusion. So all or nothing thinking, jumping to conclusions are two of the primary thinking traps or automatic negative thoughts that we can have. Let's talk about some more. All right, the next one is emotional reasoning. So that's when we have an emotion and we try to reason that out in our brain. So we assume that because we feel a certain way that what we think and feel must be true. So for example, I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot because I wouldn't feel embarrassed if I'm not an idiot. So I must be an idiot. And then we buy that thought or we believe that thought. Or I feel awkward, so other people must think I'm awkward too. Or I feel nervous, so that means something's going to happen here. Something is going to go bad or something is going to go wrong because I feel jittery. I feel like something's going to happen. Or I feel lonely, so that means I must not have many friends. Well, there are times in my life where I have felt lonely or alone, but it doesn't necessarily mean I don't have any friends. I have a ton of friends. Another one is overgeneralizing, and this is seeing a pattern based upon a single event. So like the test that we failed, that's the scenario. That because we failed the test, that's a pattern of what we do. We haven't got our homework done, we failed the quizzes, we haven't done the presentation, and now we're failing the whole class, and we're not looking at the entire evidence of it. Or being overly broad in the conclusions we draw, often using words like never, always. And so, but we don't use the words like sometimes or maybe. So we use these words that define what's going to happen. Like it for sure, like this, I'm never going to get into college. And when we use words like that, we don't allow room for improvement. We don't allow room in our brains for flexibility. And another one is ignoring the good. So we focus more on the bad. We're kind of like Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh, discounting or ignoring the good things that have happened or that we've done and thinking that good things don't count. So that's ignoring the good. Paying attention to only certain types of evidence by noticing our failures, but not our successes. So you might be making improvement like, okay, well, wait a minute, I need to step back and I need to look at the evidence of this before I jump to a conclusion. But the only evidence that you look at is the not so good evidence. It's the negative evidence, but you discount or you dismiss all the good things, all the good grades, all the learning that has happened in that class. So those are 3 other ones. Let's go on and cover a few more. All right, the next one is catastrophizing. And that is when we blow up and we blow things out of proportion. And we catastrophize it, like everything is a catastrophe. And you've heard the saying, you're making this a mountain out of a molehill, like it's something really, really insignificant or really small, and you're making it significant. But that's sometimes you'll do that with everything. And so let's say you go out to a restaurant to eat with your friends, and your friends say, hey, why don't you pick where we eat tonight? You're like, no, I don't want, you pick. I don't care. I don't really. And your friends say, no, I chose last time. You pick. So you picked, and it wasn't a good meal. You're like, see, I can never pick a good restaurant to eat at. And so you catastrophize everything. I told you should have chose the restaurant. Sometimes you go to a restaurant and it's not a good match. It's not good. That's okay. It doesn't mean you have a bad picker, that you pick bad restaurants. Should statements, coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's focusing on the past. I have this saying, don't look through the rear view mirror so much. Look through the windshield. And there's a reason that the rear view mirror in your car is very small and the windshield is very large. It's huge, but the windshield is very tiny, or the rear view mirror is very tiny. Look forward. We have to look in the past. We have to look, what's behind us, like in a car. But we don't want to look at it very long. You don't drive down the road looking in your rear view mirror the entire time. Most of the time, I would say probably 99% of the time or more, you're looking, hopefully, through the windshield, unless you're actually backing up. But as you're going down the road, you're looking more through the windshield than the rear view mirror. So that's sort of what we want to practice with our brains. Like, that was done, that's over. Don't let that haunt us. Don't let that thought of what I should have done or what I could have done hijack us. You have to let it go. You have to move forward. And because those thoughts will continually hijack if your brain continues to look through the rearview mirror. So practice this with your brain of looking through the windshield, always moving forward. Well, that was then, this is now. There's a little strategy I have called brush and flush, which is brush it off, flush it down the toilet, and move on. Now, we don't want to totally always forget things. We do want to learn from things, so we hold on a little bit, but we got to keep that in context, okay? So we have to move forward with learning from the past and becoming a better person. A lot of times we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder like PTSD, where people have trauma, and in the present it feels like that trauma is here. But what we don't talk about a lot? What we don't talk about a lot is post-traumatic growth. And this is a part of that post-traumatic growth, growing from it. A lot of times when people have trauma, whether it's childhood adverse experiences or something that is traumatic, and we can grow from it, and we can grow a lot, and we can be better people. We can make better decisions. We have better context. We look at things with a better framework and a better lens. That's called post-traumatic growth. But you have to be able to capture the thought. You have to be able to understand what's happening and not look through that rear view mirror so much, but look through the windshield. Okay, there's just a few more. So these are automatic negative thoughts. These are thinking traps, or what I call stinking thinking. They're patterns of automatic negative thoughts. Judging yourself unfairly. Humans are pretty critical of themselves. And so here's an example. I'm such a loser. I can't do anything right. I'm so stupid. I'm the only one who can't do this. I'm ugly. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. I'm too tall. I'm too short. I'm not athletic enough. I'm not whatever. These are value scripts. You were made by a creator, and you were made perfectly the way you are. And it's not that we don't improve, but judging yourself unfairly can crush us, and it can cause us to feel sad and depressed and anxious and not worthy, and it can actually drive our behavior. I know some folks that I've counseled in the past who have told me, Kevin, I was not a math kid. I'm not a math person. I don't understand math. And that thought was so strong that it actually drove me, in other words, my actions, my behavior, into a different field like counseling and social work, and something that had very little to do with math because I'm not a math person. And so those feelings can be those actions, those thoughts are really, really powerful. They're strong and they can drive us to make life decisions like what kind of career we're going into. All right, another one is accepting helplessness, deciding there's nothing you can do when maybe we haven't tried everything, or deciding to give up. That's called flopping. You've heard, I'm sure, of the stress response system of fight, flight, freeze. But there's also friend and there's also flop. There's actually 5 F's. Fight, flight, fright, freeze, friend, and flop. And a lot of times with flop, we give up. We're like, man, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I do, what I say. I can study all day for this test. He's still going to give me a D. He's still going to give me an F on the test, so I'm not even going to do it. And that's a defense mechanism. We avoid and we escape. And so, but it's also a thinking pattern called accepting helplessness. Nothing I could do about it. So there is something we can do about it. We have a choice in everything that we do. Every situation, we have a choice. And so we just have to really recognize these distorted, automatic negative thoughts, and then we have to capture them. All right, the last one I'm going to go over is perfectionism. And this is that it's holding ourselves to an unreasonable standard, very, very high perfectionism. Everything has to be perfect, and being unable to tolerate mistakes. It often leads to beating yourself up over small mistakes or errors, and can lead to other thinking traps like should statements, and judging yourself unfairly. So this is perfectionism, and this an example of this is there might be sometimes I'm typing on the computer. This is a perfect example, and I'm not saying I'm a perfectionist, but it's kind of like that thinking. So sometimes I'm typing on the computer, and I'll have a misspelled word, and I'll have to erase the whole thing instead of go back and just like fix one letter or 2 letters. I have to, okay, because it just feels better in my brain to get it correct. Perfectionism will cause us to be highly anxious and also depressed. And it might be not a full depression, but it might be a low-grade depression that we didn't do. We could have done better. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at a situation or look at ourselves and always about practice improvement, like how can I improve? But don't beat yourself up about small mistakes. Learn from them and move on. Brush and flush and capture that thought, and then move on and enjoy life. All right, so let's get to, well, if we have these automatic negative thoughts, we have these patterns, then what are some strategies we can use? And I've been talking to you about the strategy as I've been going through these automatic negative thoughts, and that is recognizing. We call it capturing the thought, but I'm going to add to that, and here we go. Okay, so I call this the 3 C's, the letter C, and because the letter C begins the 3 strategies that we're going to use. The first one is catch it or capture it. So catch the thought. Just don't let it, come into your head automatically and you buy it or believe it. And you heard me say buy it because that's the terminology we use in the behavioral circles that I'm in, is that people will buy their thoughts. I think about it like this. I go to the grocery store and I'm, trying to pick out a box of cereal. And if you've been to a grocery store lately, they have lots of different cereals that you can choose from. I mean, lots. I don't know, maybe, 100 or hundreds. I don't know how many. There's like an incredible amount of cereal that you can choose from. And I'm walking down that aisle with my cart, and I can choose what cereal I want to buy. So that's sort of like the thoughts we have. Those thoughts are there. They're just there, and there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of thoughts. I get to choose what thought I want to put in my basket and buy. Okay? Or I can leave it on the shelf. A lot of times I'll counsel with people and say, you can choose to buy that thought or you can choose to leave it on the shelf. It's your choice. Because a lot of times our brain lies to us. It tricks us. That's what automatic negative thoughts do. They trick us because we don't see all the evidence. We jump to a conclusion. We're not flexible. We're sort of black and white with it, or we have a high standard of perfectionism. And boy, if we don't meet that, then it's not good enough. And the whole thing is just a failure. So our brain lies to us all the time. It thinks about the worst case scenario. Why? Because it was made for survival. It was made to keep us alive. So it's going to think of the worst case scenario. So we have the choice to catch it and buy it. Okay. We have a choice to put it in our cart or leave it on the shelf. And that's called capturing or catching it. And then challenging it. That's the second. So we have this thought and it's on the shelf, just like that cereal box of cereal. And we think, all right, is that thought correct? Is it accurate? Is there evidence behind it? Is it real? Or is my brain doing what it's supposed to do? And I need to say, thank you, brain. I'm going to give you a brain kiss. Thank you for thinking of a thought. That's what you're doing your job. Good job. Way to go. But then we can decide whether we want to accept, believe, or what I call buy that thought. Or we can change it. We can go to a different cereal box in the cereal aisle of the grocery store. We're like, oh, thank you. There's a thought. There's a cereal. Not today. I'm going to move on and pick out a different thought or a different cereal. And that's called change it. So catch it, capture the thought, recognize it, challenge it. Okay, that's a thought, but it doesn't mean I have to buy it, and choose a different thought. I'm going to change it. That's called cognitive coping. Cognition is the way we think. So, and when I catch the thought, I challenge the thought, and I change the thought, that's a coping skill, and that's called cognitive coping. That's the strategy. And when we use that strategy, we can actually improve the process of those automatic negative thoughts. And over time, we exercise our brain enough with this strategy of catch it, challenge it, and change it that we can actually start to have more helpful thoughts rather than hurtful thoughts come into our brain. We just have to exercise this strategy a lot. It's just like going to the gym with our bodies, but we're going to go to the brain gym and we're going to exercise this technique over and over and over. Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into this technique. All right, so how do I catch it, challenge it, change it? Well, let me go through the process. Let me just break this down. So we're going to catch the ants, and then we call it untwisting our thinking. So you remember that negative downward spiral? We want to untwist that, and there's a way that we can. All right, let me put on my glasses here so I can read this. All right, so the first step we're going to do is capture it or catch it, and that is identify the problem situation. Like, or the first part of it is, what's the situation I'm in? Oh, I'm going to this party and I don't know, I'm going to look like an idiot if I don't dress the right way. Okay, so that's the situation. Or I didn't prepare for my presentation, or I got an F on the test, or I walked through the hallway and said hello to my friend and my friend didn't say hello back to me. That's the situation, okay? That's what the situation that's making me feel this way. All right, so then I've got to pay attention to our thoughts. I got to pay attention to my thinking. Actually, what I like to do is to separate myself, like I'm in the room, like I'm distant from myself. I'm kind of looking on to myself, and I'm like, oh, there's Kevin, and here's what he's thinking right now. So think about it like this, that if you were a cartoon character, what would be in your thought bubble? What am I thinking right now? So you're actually thinking about your thinking. Okay? So it's very like behavioral scientific when when you do this. And then you think, am I having any automatic negative thoughts about this situation? So you separate yourself, look at your thought bubble like a cartoon, and you're like, am I having any automatic negative? This is an automatic negative thought. I'm thinking I'm stupid because I got an F on this assignment, or I'm thinking I'll never get into college. That's one of the cereal boxes in the aisle of cereals. I don't have to buy this thought, but I do have to recognize it. So that's why I went over those negative thinking patterns, those distorted thinking patterns, so we could actually start to identify or capture those. All right, then step number 3 is I'm going to decide if I'm falling into one of these traps, if I'm jumping to conclusions, if I'm assuming the worst, if I am an inflexible black and white thinker, if I'm a perfectionist, and you know, it's either do it this way or bust. Nothing's good. So step number 4 is, after you catch the ants and the thinking traps, ask yourself some questions. So this is the exercises we want to go through. Number 1 is, would a detective find any evidence that your thoughts are true? Because remember, I told you that a lot of times our brain lies to us. It comes up with the worst case scenario. Why? Because it's built to survive. And I'm going to come up with the worst case scenario. What if this happens? Because I'm trying to protect myself. It's a natural defense mechanism. What would I tell a friend who was having these thoughts? Like if I was separate and I could tell my friend was having these automatic negative thoughts, like jumping to conclusions, or the worst case scenario, or black and white inflexible thinking, or perfectionism, or catastrophizing. I must be the worst person. This is horrible. What would you tell your friend? And then if my thought did come true, how would I cope with it? If this was actually true, I'm not going to get into college now. I'm the worst kid in the class. If it was true, how would I cope with that? What steps would I take to deal with it, to address with it? Those are great questions. They're simple questions. There's only 3. You can come up with more, but those are the 3 common ones we ask to exercise that part of our thinking brain. All right, number 5, after you answer the above questions, come up with what's called a coping thought. And a coping thought is a more helpful thought. All right, there's the cereal box. That's the thought I'm having. Okay, good job, brain. You're coming up with a thought. You're doing your job. But I don't have to pick that cereal box off the shelf and put it in my cart. I don't have to pick that thought and put it in my cart and buy it and believe it. I can put it back on the shelf. I can challenge it, and then I can change it. And this is the changing part of it, which is I can come up with a new thought. I can come up with a more helpful thought. So maybe, for example, I think, well, I got an F on this test. That's the reality. But when I look at the evidence, I might be getting a C in the class. It might drop me to a D, but I'm still passing the class. It doesn't mean I failed the class. And I might need some extra help, and I can get some extra help from my teacher, because my teacher has said, hey, if you need extra help, just come up and ask me. I'd be glad to meet with you and give you some extra help. My teacher wants me to pass this class. He or she wants me to be successful. It doesn't mean I'm not going to get into college. I have one bad grade. I can improve from here. That's a part of cognitive coping. That's a coping thought. That's coming up with a more helpful thought in that situation. So some examples of coping thoughts are: this feeling won't last forever. I'm going to brush it and flush it and move on. I can learn from this and it'll be better, easier. I'll be improved the next time. It's okay to make mistakes. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. There's no perfect person out there, and I'm certainly not perfect, so I can't expect this high level of perfectionism. I've done this before. I can do it again. I've gone through tough times. I've been through tough challenges. I've done it before. This is a tough challenge. I can do it again. So that's just exercising that brain. Okay, so when we catch it, we challenge it, we change it, we're actually interrupting or disrupting the negative thinking, the ants. That's the strategy. When we catch it, identify it, we challenge it, we change it, that cognitive coping skill, we actually disrupt the ant. And we substitute or change that ant with a different thought, a more helpful and hurtful thought. So moving forward, if you're a person, and we all have automatic negative thoughts, but if you have a lot of them, this is the strategy you use: interrupt it. So identify, I'm going to fail. That's the thought I have, but I can interrupt that thought and come up with a more helpful thought. I probably won't get an A, but maybe I'll do okay. I'm not prepared at all. Why didn't I study? Well, next time I'll try to be more organized and start studying earlier. My GPA is going to go way down. I'll have to work really hard to get my grades back up, but I can do it. My teacher's going to think I'm a slacker. I'm going to go talk to my teacher about the test and I'm see what kind of help. My parents are going to be so upset. I don't know how my family will react, but all I can do is try. Hopefully they'll be happy with my best performance. So we want to interrupt or disrupt the automatic negative thoughts and replace them or substitute them with a more helpful, hopeful thought. We just have to practice and practice and practice. Okay, so this is the last slide, and we're finished with this little professional development training pop, PD pop, I call it. And speaking of practice, here is your homework. I want you to practice cognitive coping. I want you to pinpoint the worry or the negative thought. I want you to be able to catch it. I want you to be able to capture it, be aware of it, identify it. What's that thought I'm having? If you need to go back and review this recording and look at those really common automatic negative thoughts that I went over, to be able to identify them, write them down when you're having the thoughts. Make a note on your phone about that's the thought I'm having. That's what he's talking about. Step 2, ask yourself questions. What would I say to a friend? Is there any evidence to back this up? What if an investigator, a detective was looking at this? Would they be able to back it up with some evidence? And so that's challenging it, right? So I'm going to catch it. I'm going to challenge it, and then I'm going to change it. So I'm going to generate a new thought. What is a new, helpful, or more hopeful thought you can substitute the negative thought with? Okay. When you practice these 3 steps called cognitive coping, you're going to be able to address your automatic negative thoughts much better. And your outcome, the behavior that will flow from that, will be much better as well. Okay, I kind of fibbed. There is one more slide, and this is the upward spiral, because when you practice cognitive coping, you'll start to experience this upward spiral caused by cognitive coping. So the downward spiral that I showed you earlier was caused by automatic negative thoughts, and this is an upward spiral that is better outcomes. You're going to feel better. You're going to think better. You're going to feel better. Your behavior is going to be better. So let's go back to that same situation that caused the downward spiral. My homework is late again. Well, this class is hard for me, and I need to get some extra help. I'm going to talk to my teacher. I'm going to work on this assignment for an hour, so you start to set some targeted goals for yourself. That was hard, but I'm making progress, and I think I can get my next assignment in on time as well. And then that promotes pride and hope and optimism and accomplishment, and it's an upward spiral. That's what cognitive coping does. So we all have automatic negative thoughts. There is a strategy called catch it and challenge it and change it that we can use to help us with this upward spiral. Hope you enjoyed this training, and we'll see you down the road. Take care.